Yep.
I really could do with the mics on. If you could
The mics are on.
I hear you.
Oh, right. Is this any better?
Yeah, but
Okay, so welcome to Liverpool. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Kelly, and I am founder of the IWMW series all those many years ago. It's the Institutional Web Management Workshop series, founded by myself in my first year at UConn at the University of Bath, and it was launched at King's College London in July 1997. Was anybody at that event? Just me, showing my age. And it's now an established 3-day event, which was relaunched in 2014 after the cessation of UConn funding. So this is a 20th in the series. For those of you who are new to it, we have a combination of the plenary talks in this lecture theatre, a panel session also in this lecture theatre, and a number of parallel workshop sessions this afternoon and masterclasses tomorrow afternoon. And this event is also an amplified event. So hello to everybody who may be watching this live video stream or watching a recording of this talk later on. So just to clarify the rights, you are free to record this talk, to take photos, and to tweet and blog and share your thoughts with your peers and the wider community. And in order to facilitate such sharing, there is an event hashtag, #IWMW16, and if you use that in combination with, say, one of the plenary talks, this is #P0, or #A1 to A9 for the workshops, and similarly for the masterclasses. That makes it easy for people to look at the Twitter stream later on and make some sense of the discussions that were taking place.
Right.
Yep.
We
Not just, can we keep that later? Because
be able presenters to put the hashtags in their slides
Oh.
so people can actually remember what they are.
okay, the chairperson I'll ask them to do that. Thanks, Chris. There is an official communications app called Hoover. Who has signed up and used the Hoover app? Okay, well over half, 2/3 of the audience. So that will be used, the timetable and the rooms for the sessions are on that app. It can also be used for comms, to making contacts with people, and also a number of us can send out a broadcast message. So something you may find is that tomorrow we send an announcement to say there's free beer down one of the bars down the Albert Dock. So there's motivation for you to use that. But also if there's lost property or any problems, we will be using that for the instant communications. Also, in the run-up to this event, I launched the IWMW blog. And this was intended initially for people to look back and reflect at the things that have happened over that long period of 20 years. There have been 31 guest posts published so far, and maybe we should look at how this communal blog might be used after the event for sharing across the community. So a number of people in the audience will have contributed to that post, and rather than me looking back at the past, I'd just like to come up with some of the comments from the contributors to the blog. Lorcan Dempsey was the man who appointed me at UConn, and in my first year he says, "Brian, I think we should have an event. You should organise an event for university web managers." And I was really apprehensive. I've never organised an event before. I don't know what we'll do, you know. It was actually quite scaring. But it worked, built on it, and then it got better when my former colleague Marika was co-chair and did an awful lot to help continue and sustain that event. And in Lorcan's blog post, he described how the event was instrumental in successfully building a community around shared questions and directions. And really, that is what this event is about. Shared directions. What should we be doing? And shared questions. And how should we be doing it? And over the next 3 days, you'll be hearing plenary speakers, workshop facilitators, but most importantly, yourselves will be asking variants of those two questions. Gareth, has Gareth arrived yet? Hi, Gareth. I'll appreciate it if you fall asleep during the talk, because you got up at 5 this morning, was it? 4:30. Yeah. And so Gareth contributed to this and would say, for me, it's more than a conference, it's a community, and it's a privilege to be a part of the community. And I think that's something those of us who have been part of this community for several years will appreciate what Gareth is saying there. And then Ian St. John, is Ian around? Ian? Hi, Ian. It's more than a community. So the institutional web, it's not a race. We're not looking to have the best website, because all our universities are very different levels of funding and size of the web teams. Ian's in a web team of 1 and is running a web team. Apparently, internal communications isn't a problem in the web team of 1. So we don't want to necessarily be the best, but we want to achieve our own personal best. So just as Ian does this when he does his marathon running and is running, we will be looking to achieve our own personal best in a professional sense. So Ian commented in 2006, he had no idea what IWMW was, but I think one of the sponsors mentioned it, and he came along, and 10 years later, Ian feels that IWMW is about the people you meet and network with on the social nights and who become your friends. And I think that's important. It's about professional networking, but it's also about developing, possibly friendships and support. So we all suffer difficult times, moan about our work, our colleagues, our senior managers and the like, but there are also those challenging personal issues in our lives. A number of people have been made redundant, or their institution has been downsized. And it's good to be able to talk to one's peers about those type of issues. So it is more than just a community. Rob Bristow, who's now working for JISC, describes 1999, he attended his first IWMW events, really enjoyed it, went to a couple more, but then was not able to go to a number of the events in the mid-2000s. And he said he really felt that loss of the stimulus and refreshment of knowledge and interest. I felt like I missed the start of the whole Web 2.0 thing as a result. I think it was 2006 when there was a whole buzz about Web 2.0. What should we be doing? Is it a threat? Should we be blocking it? Should we be encouraging it? Those type of things. And it was within this type of forum we had those opportunities to have such conversations. So this year's content might have creeped up to about 30 speakers. The theme, Understanding Users, Managing Change and Delivering Services, was agreed. We had a regular Slack conference calls Friday afternoons, the various advisory group members, and we came up with that theme. So thank you to all of those people for the ideas and sharing. And so I'd like to apply that first theme, Understanding Users, to my user community, which is you guys and the people who are at the office watching this. So what do IWMW attendees want? Well, I analysed the feedback from last year's event. Partly it might be, just continue as before. 100% of the respondents felt the content was very good or excellent. So thanks for all the speakers and contributors who helped achieve that. They enjoyed the relevant case studies. It was relevant for people. It was advice that was implementable. Opportunities to discuss with one's peers was really important. And then people, they often say this, it would be nice to go to the other parallel sessions as well. You're in one, but I want to go to those other ones. Why don't those people running those other parallel sessions keep on repeating them so I can go to them all? Or more IWMW events held throughout the year. Well, I thought about that. What do we do? But also, there were the questions about we want some inspirational speakers. But we also want some new speakers, the opportunity for people who may be new to the community to contribute to the community. So those were all the factors. But attending the multiple parallel sessions, well, facilitators can share their slides, share their other resources there, but the attendees can also help by tweeting about what's going on, by publishing reports about the sessions and making those publicly available afterwards, maybe on the IWMW blog. So there are ways in which we can enhance the learning which otherwise might be trapped in a parallel session. And then more IWMW events, well, Duncan Ireland is facilitating a masterclass tomorrow on IWMW in miniature, and that will be saying, can we have a framework for building this type of events and sharing on a regional basis? So I think there might be still some places on Duncan's session. So Duncan, if you give people a wave, grab hold of Duncan about that. About you, it's now 139 registered delegates. Has the person from Abertay arrived yet? Hi, who rang me up at 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon and says, I want to come, it's really great. So that's really good. 139 registered delegates. Hands up if you're a first timer. Right, that should be about 37% of the audience. It's really great, those new people coming along. Hands up if you're female. So that should be about that should be about 30% of the audience, and about 21% are speakers or facilitators. So let me say there are 8 of us who've been to 11 or more of the events, and 8 female speakers. We've been trying to be proactive and encourage female members of the community to have a profile at these events. And I looked at all 20 events, so it's been 621 speakers at all events, and 320 speakers and 342 speakers, individual speakers at the events. That's just a bit of a profiling about, this is our community. It's kind of interesting that, so many of you might be featured in that Google spreadsheet. You can go and have a look and check I've got the figures right. And the other thing we got on the feedback from last year, I asked the delegates, what did you think about the commercial involvement in this year's events, more than previous years, and the sponsorship? And the response was, oh, it's fine. You know, it was really good, as long as they don't, it's not just the salespeople, but they've got some good talks last year. And then I asked the sponsors what they thought, and they thought it was great to meet people, but we feel we could offer more than just being on a desk and giving some pens, even when they're great pens. There are some great pens out there. We feel we can actually share our expertise with the community. So this year we have a couple of plenary talks from the sponsors, and a number of parallel sessions from the sponsors as well. And we're hoping that will continue, and we feel we've got a really good dynamic going between the UK HE web community and the vendor community. So use this opportunity to talk to the sponsors, visit the exhibition, and learn from their sessions. But rather than listen to me, some of you may know this guy. Who recognises this guy? Shout out his name if you recognise the guy. Right, where's his... I did cash it just before. Oh, come on. Any questions while we're waiting for Paul to...
Is the quick time?
Which is the quick time? Oh, it's that one. There.
Hello, Brian, and hello to everybody at IWMW 2016. So this is the 20th year of IWMW, and that just blows my mind. When IWMW started, most people hadn't even heard of email, let alone the web. Not only didn't the iPhone exist, but even the first iPod wasn't going to be released for another 5 years. Netscape Navigator was the browser of choice for most people, and Internet Explorer 1 had only just been released. It was a much simpler time, wasn't it, really? And I kind of miss it. A time without the complications of things like responsive design, or even pesky things like CSS. Wasn't the world so much simpler when we all built things in front page and table-based design? For the good old days. Anyway, enough of the past. For many of you, this is your first time at IWMW, and I want to welcome you on behalf of all of us veterans. I also wanted to share with you a few tips to make sure you get the most out of this very unique event. First of all, if you work for a commercial organisation, be warned. These university types are always ready to fleece you for every penny you're worth. Expect to be picking up the tab at the bar for most of the event. Second, if you work at a university, make sure you fleece those commercial people. They're absolutely desperate for your work, and so make sure you take advantage of them. Third, make sure you say hello to Brian, who runs these events. He's a great guy with years of experience. But you need to be careful. Don't get onto the subject of real ale unless you have several hours to waste, and if he mentions swords or dancing, make sure you make your excuses and leave promptly. Finally, make sure you take part in the most important activity of IWMW, the heart and soul of the event. Make sure that you take the time to get drunk with colleagues from other institutions and bitch and moan about how shit your job is. Nothing is more therapeutic than discovering that every institution in the sector is just as screwed up as yours. So, thanks for coming and have an amazing time at this 20th IWMW. I'm just sorry that I can't be there with you.
Thank you, Paul. So, Paul's actually a sponsor of this event, so he's given me some money to dole out to you guys. So what I'd like to do now is spend some of Paul's money. So there will be various prizes available. And so the first prize will be a contributor to the IWMW blog. So if I go to the randomizer tool, and I've pasted the people here, so I may have spammed many of you, say, would you like to write something? If you decline that opportunity, well, you've missed this opportunity. So this is a random name. Some people won't be physically present. Helen Sorgan. Oh, bugger. Sorry, I didn't expect that. Oh, that's amazing. That wasn't arranged in advance. Helen is a real star, has attended a vast large number of these events. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here, but she's written a blog post with her memories of the events on the IWMW blog, and I would really strongly recommend that you read that blog post and maybe contribute to her Just Giving account, which mentioned in the final paragraph. So I'll make sure I send something to Helen. So that was the first prize. The second prize goes to a first timer at IWMW events. So if I can just go through to the spreadsheet of they were the guest bloggers, first timers. Oops. I think that's it. Jennifer Robertson, you're the last name on that, is that right? So if we go through to Control A, Control V, yep. It should be a roll of the drums here. Emma Cottle, is Emma here? Ah, right. So what would you like? Would you like, we have the we have the branded USB 3 memory sticks with the really nice cool logo on it. This will be really valuable in 25th anniversary. Say there's only 25 of these, or the T-shirt, the IWMW T-shirt with the which would you like, Emma?
It has to be the
USB. I'm sorry. Come down and grab me afterwards. No, that one's yours. And finally, so each of the session chairs will be giving out various prizes, but I'm first and I get 3. And one of the prizes will be to somebody who's contributed to the event in some special way, some unsolicited way. And so it was somebody who sent me an email a month or so ago and says, Brian, IWMW is really great, but I think it could do with a new logo. And I hope you don't mind, but I've produced this new logo. What do you think? If you don't like it, that's fine. So, Stephen? Where's Stephen Ashurst? There you go. So, round of applause for Stephen. And so that's great. So now, if we can pass over to the first plenary speaker, Neil Allison from the University of Edinburgh. We're just 4 minutes behind, so I'll go straight. It's you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Spot my surprise. Anyone seen that?
Sorry.
That's all right, no? Make me go quicker over the first couple of slides. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much for inviting me, Brian, and hello everybody. Not at all intimidating to be the first one up to speak. So here I am, requirements and hypotheses and my experiences with Lean UX. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've been learning over the last year or so and what I've been putting into practice. I'll start off with an inspirational quote because it's always good to start off with something like that, and this is a line that I roll out quite regularly when I'm talking about usability testing and things like that. And I was going to ask the group if anybody had an idea which UX guru had come up with such a line, but I suspect that you probably saw the answer to that as we flashed the slides up. It's actually that UX specialist, Benny Hill. So what happened? Last year I went along to a full-day workshop by a very inspirational guy called Jeff Gothelf, who also wrote the Lean UX book. And the day was all about how large organizations can adapt and change the way that they work in very challenging business environments where small startup companies are coming into various industries and disrupting the way that they work. And I thought that was really interesting for the HE sector, because I'm sure it's coming. It hasn't impacted us in maybe quite the same way it has other areas so far, but I'm pretty sure it's just a matter of time. But it was a real light bulb moment for me, and it's really had a profound effect in how I go about thinking about projects and things that I'm working on. So while you're probably or possibly not involved in product development yourself, I would suggest that the things that I'm going to talk about today are equally relevant. So if you're involved in software development or maintenance, if you run a service, if you look after a bit of a website, you're looking after content delivery, that kind of thing, the principles and the things I'm going to talk about today hopefully will resonate with you too. So, first thing, there's this mythical state of perfection. And the idea that the project that we're working on, the software that we're delivering, the website that we're delivering, that when we're done on this project, it will be done and it will be perfect. And certainly I think amongst people who fund our work, they have that kind of expectation. And I would argue there's, we maybe don't do enough to dispel that myth. So this tree standing there in the fog, it's a mythical state of product perfection, and that's what we're trying to reach. Okay. Now think for a second about the projects that you run and how you go about executing them. Do you get together with your team, look at that tree in the fog, decide on a path, and just march off in that direction? Now what if there's a cliff somewhere in that fog? Or maybe something not quite so dramatic, but nevertheless something that should be causing you to, that will knock you off track or delay you or that kind of thing. If we were really there, looking at that tree off in the distance, realistically, would we do that? Would we just set off marching in that direction regardless and just keep going until we're told to stop, till we run out of steam, run out of money? Not really, would we? We would take a few steps, survey where we got to now, just check the surroundings, and potentially change path if we see a quagmire or something in the way, and adjust our path as we head in that direction. So why can't we do this with development too? And that's really what all this is about. So I mentioned this guy, Jeff Gothelf. Here he is in all his glory, and there's the book. There's a lot more people talk about this topic. There's also another book I would recommend by a guy called Thomas Sharon. He talks about validating product experiences. But for people who haven't come across this concept before, I've just totally ripped off, well, I've ripped off quite a lot of Jeff's work here in these slides. I'm not be shy about that. There's a lot of good ideas in there. So, inspired by lean startup and agile development, it's the practice of bringing the true nature of product to light faster in a collaborative, cross-functional way. We work to build a shared understanding of the customer, their needs, our proposed solutions, and definition of success. And we prioritize learning over delivery to build evidence for our decisions. Wise words. But in a nutshell, what he's talking about is this idea that requirements are assumptions. Or to put it another way, the way I think about it, it's about making sure that what you're doing is likely to be a good idea in the first place, and not putting too much effort into it until you've established that it is a good idea. So, how many web pages have we built? How many websites? How many features in software? How many services do we run that are basically redundant, or they're costing you a lot to maintain, or they're having an impact on the overall user experience? And how did they come to be like that in the first place? Possibly it's because nobody stopped to ask why, or because the boss just said, just do it, I've decided this is a good idea and this is what we're going to do.
The voice needs projecting a bit for the audience at the back.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Can we make me any louder? That's just... That's a real novelty for me. I'm not usually told that I'm too quiet.
It's on maximum now.
Yeah.
Do you want Duncan? Is that? Can you?
Hello, hello, 1, 2.
It's not picking you up from behind there properly. You need to project a lot more for those microphones to work. We're barely getting you over the ear contact here.
Well, I can point them towards me a bit more. I'll speak a bit louder.
Louder.
Yeah, okay, I'll start. I'm not... Okay, right. Where was I then? So, was it a good idea? So, anyway, we'll skip out from me. I just want to share a little video with you for a second. 2.
You mean that's it?
Do you even know what it is?
It's gum.
Yeah. It's a stick of the most amazing and sensational gum in the whole universe. Know why? Know why? Because this gum is a full 3-course dinner all by itself.
Why would anyone want that?
It will be the end of all kitchens and all cooking. Just a little strip of Wonka's magic chewing gum, and that is all you will ever need at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This piece of gum happens to be tomato soup, roast beef, and blueberry pie.
It sounds great.
It sounds weird. Sounds like my kind of gum.
Go. Let's get back to it. So, how often have we encountered that kind of experience, where there's a marketing vision of what it is that we're going to deliver, or better yet, a vice principal has a fantastic idea for a new thing that we're going to do, and we plow on and we do it, regardless of our understanding of how the audience is going to react to it. So all that effort that you put into delivering something, and you might actually achieve success by the measure of what your vice principals are expecting, to get that reaction of, it sounds weird, or just apathy, perhaps. So basically, Lean UX is all about doing just enough to establish whether development is a good idea, and using evidence of user interaction or demand for the thing that you're putting out there to justify continuing down that particular path. There's a well-used phrase in the field, and that's fail fast and fail cheap. But I would suspect that if you used that phrase back in the office, that probably wouldn't go down too well. I prefer to use the word learn fast, learn cheap, rather than fail. That'll probably work a little bit better. Again, I said I would steal quite a lot from Jeff. So this really caused me to reflect on how we've been working at the University of Edinburgh. So with the website program, we've just delivered a new content management system. And over the past 3 or so years, we've been working agile. And I think we're okay at it. You know, we've learned a lot along the way, and it's gone pretty well. People are pretty happy with the product that we've delivered. And if you're interested, some colleagues of mine are running a great workshop a little bit later this afternoon, all about how that all went. But I personally found it a bit frustrating at times because of this feature focus. For some parts of the team, the university's expectation as a whole, our measure of success has been on feature X, feature Y, and just churning them out as progress with the content management system. And of course, I'm biased because I work in user experience, so I see a lot more value in taking what we've got and making it better and making it work better and learning about what users want from what we've got rather than necessarily pursuing the next bell or the next whistle. And of course, there's a balance to be struck there. But I think this from Jeff is incredibly true. You know, we are measured on the things that we deliver rather than on the outcomes that really underlie the features. Why are we putting these things in place? So that we can do particular things, or we encourage users to do particular things. And if you take nothing else away from what I'm talking about today, take this, and I challenge you to use it, really. This is the lean hypothesis statement. We believe that, insert your business outcome here, will be achieved if a particular group of users can successfully attain their outcome with the feature. Notice in that statement, the feature comes last. But how often is it that people come to you with software or website development and the thing that they come with is the feature? And the business outcome and the user group and the user's goals or aims are implicit. They're possibly never actually expressed explicitly so that you have something clear to measure the feature or the value of the feature against. I find this really useful, and this has really turned around how I think about a lot of stuff that we do. So dig into the feature. What is it actually there to do? It's not about delivering the feature itself. It's what the feature can do for the business and what the feature can do for the user. So this is the lean UX cycle. There are tons of cycles of development. You've possibly seen this one, or certainly seen one similar to this before. But where should we start whenever we work in this area? Always start with some learning. So whether we're talking about developing something new or enhancing something that you already have, you really need to start by learning about what your users need and want, and what the business needs and wants. And I'd say that's not necessarily by going out and asking, because what people say they want and what they really want are two different things. There's a great website called UX Myths, I think it's number 23. It's all about this, with all the research that sits behind the idea of what people say and what they want. So really what we're trying to do is understand, hopefully from observation and interaction and evidence of demand, and with your team collaboratively generate ideas of how we might deliver on that demand, and build something as quickly and as cheaply as possible, then measure the effect, and then work out whether to develop it or kill it off. And go back to your learning and generate new ideas if your first ideas weren't as great as you thought they were. So, as I've said so far, that's pretty much been other people's work. So what I'm going to move on to now and talk about for a little bit is my experience, or rather our team's experience. I've got two little case studies for you of how we've been putting the ideas of Lean UX into practice at the website program. So I said at the start that I went along to this Lean UX for Enterprise day-long workshop, which was absolutely excellent. And basically, it took us through a workshop, and these were the things that we did. We began with a specific desired outcome for a business, and as a little team working together, we collaboratively established what are the business outcomes that are important to us, what things could we do and measure that will give us an indication of the greater desired outcome, that we were working towards that. Being clear and explicit together about who our users were that we were serving, what we thought they wanted to achieve as well. And then and only then brainstorming what features we might develop to deliver for both the business and for the user. And because we've got outcomes in there, we have an idea of the things that we put in place, how we're going to measure whether those features are actually doing the business for us. So basically, what I did was, I went back to our team, and I'm a user support manager as well, and we were in the middle of a review. Because of the new CMS coming aboard, we were dropping some things that we've done previously, and we had new challenges to meet, so we were changing how we were doing things with user support. So with my little support team, I set a target. I wanted to see a month-on-month reduction in one-to-one time spent supporting customers with CMS requirements. And that's not by not answering the phone or answering our emails or anything like that. The idea being that our service encourages greater self-service, so all of the support calls that we deal with about, well, you need to click this, or that's a known bug, and this is the process that you go through, we would drive to more self-service so that the time and resource that we have is spent more on strategy and research and supporting people in softer skills. That was my goal. So I took them through the process that we undertook at the workshop. So the first thing that we did, and this is one of our horribly small meeting rooms, and we basically brainstormed some outcomes of things that we could seek to achieve that we thought were beneficial from our perspective. So we see more people turning up to our events, we see more participation in our surveys, we have more community involvement, we see an increase in downloads of support materials and things like that from our support wiki. Things that we could easily measure that were desirable from our perspective. So we grouped them, because we all worked individually, and we grouped them together, and we dot voted. We all got 5 votes each. And from that, we got a short list of okay, these are the outcomes that we're going to try and work towards from our perspective. The next step was to identify your users, but we've been working with personas for 7-8 years now. I spoke at the 2012 conference about our personas and that kind of thing, so you might have seen these before. So as a team, we didn't need to develop personas on the day, but when I was at the workshop itself, we created rough personas, and there they are. I took a photo and tweeted on the day that I was at that workshop. And it's not about having perfect personas. Ours are well established, and they've evolved over time because we know our user group that we support very, very well. But the point of the exercise here is to externalize your own assumptions when you're working with a team. So even if they are the most horrible, rough personas that are not based on any evidence at that point in time, get them out there so that all of your team will agree who they're trying to serve with the thing that you're working on. And as you do little bits of research and you put things out there and see how people respond and find out what they think, you learn more about your user group anyway. So these are just a starting point, so you can evolve them together as you work through a project. So moving on from having a set of personas, we brainstormed again, and this time we're identifying potential needs that our users have. And we focus on particular types of users and what we think their pain points are. So again, we ended up with a set of ideas, and we associated them with our different personas. Just as a slight aside, Ross Ferguson, who spoke here a few years ago, he kindly peer-reviewed these, and the main piece of feedback he gave me about this whole presentation was, get some better walls. And then the final step, and this was the real light bulb moment for me when I was in the workshop, because I was thinking, so far so good, lots of post-it notes, you go to UX workshops and things like that, they've got the Sharpies out, you've seen it all before. We built essentially a table, okay? So you can see the 4 columns, and you can see how rough it is when we did it ourselves. So we believe, the first column, the leftmost column, says we believe that what we're going to achieve. So with the things that we prioritized with our dot votes, we put there. Then we had our personas, and we tried to map the things that our personas wanted against the things that we wanted. And it was only then that we started thinking about those ideas, those feature ideas, the thing that normally comes first. It was only then that we started thinking about features that we could potentially do to specifically address a need for a particular type of user with a particular type of need, and map that to our need as well. So what you've got there, basically, in this very, very rough table, there was a lot of trading going on as we moved this around. Essentially, we were building those lean hypothesis statements that I talked about, and we'll come back to those again in a moment. So you can roughly see a series of rows in this table here. and each of those is generating a hypothesis statement. So here's a couple of the example ones that we've worked up. So we believe an increase in user support self-service will be achieved if Ed, our everyday editor, gets a walkthrough of key features and top tasks with video guidance to support the written materials. And another one, just as another example, we believe an increase in will increase our user support self-service if Olive, our very occasional user, gets quick answers to her CMS support questions with an inquiry form that suggests FAQs based on keywords. One of the nice things about the new CMS was some very powerful form functionality where we can put a field in and we just say, ask your question, and it's looking for keywords in the background, and it's auto-generating links back into our support wiki. So before they submit the support call, they're seeing links back. So those kind of people who go, I can't be bothered to go through your wiki to find the answer to my question, I'm just going to send an email and get you to do it for us. That was the idea there. So what did we do next? Well, we did the smallest thing we could do to test our hypotheses. We thought about what we needed to learn first, and crucially, what was the least amount of work we needed to do to learn it. And I would say with user support, it's an ongoing experiment. We're definitely succeeding here because we are experiencing a downward trend in our support calls, despite our user community growing month on month. We've delivered a new CMS. There's more interest from other parts of the university. We're doing really well in that regard. But we recognise there's a lot of factors in play more than just the little experiments that we're doing, and that's probably, in this particular experience, the biggest challenge. But what we can say is we're spotting with the videos, the analytics are showing that they're well used. The anecdotal feedback from our user group is that they like them, they'd like to see more. So it's an experiment that we're continuing. We're growing that catalogue. We're going back month on month through the support calls, looking for trends in things that people are asking over and over. We're looking for examples of where people are using our CMS really badly to deliver really awful things, and trying to put things in place again to support and promote that. And with the smart inquiry form, the biggest stat that I got out was only 2% of visitors to that form subsequently submitted a support call. Our problem, I think, with that was that we're not driving enough people to support form, and this is why it's a long-term goal for us here. We've been supporting the user community for nearly 10 years now, so there's an email address that's been out like for forever, and in tons of websites. So a significant portion of people are still avoiding the form. So the use of the form itself is working pretty well. We're just not getting enough people to the form. And I'm interested. The analytics, until they drop off a couple of points in the journey, are very promising, but I do want to do some usability testing here, because there is always that nasty risk that people are just finding the form awful. I don't think that's the case, but we want to have a look at that some more. So all in all, one success, something that we're going to keep going with, and one where we may kill it off, but we may not. But the fact is, with both of these experiments, minimal effort. We're putting as much interest into learning how people are interacting with our new products to decide whether it's worth pursuing with, rather than just blindly doing it for the next 5 years. Okay. One more example to tell you about, which is I've deliberately picked one user support thing that's got nothing to do with software development at all. This one is a bit more development focused. So our website search, we had a bit of time and resource to evolve and improve the search experience. This was back in the back end of 2014. So I ran a feature, the same survey approach that I take all the time with features and things like that. If you've ever heard of Jerry McGovern, if you haven't, Top Task Survey is fantastic. Do investigate. But basically, we ran a survey with staff and students, and we basically said, here's a lot of things that the search could do. Pick the top 3 things that you'd like the search to do that would make it a better experience for you. And you can see there that the top 3 things that people voted for accounted for 35% of the votes, the top 5, 56%. Number 3 was the one that the development guy who was working on this, his eyes lit up. The advanced search query builder. Because with the Google search tool, it pretty much came out of the box. It was a very, very quick win from a development perspective. But he realized very quickly, how am I going to make this look okay in the interface? I can see there's going to be problems. So that's why he came to me and said, can you help me design an interface to make it more usable? And I could see there was a lot of work there. Now, I've mentioned this already. It's well established that what people say and what people do aren't necessarily the same. And that was the thing that was nagging away at me here. Really, people are asking for more advanced, cleverer search things. Is that really what they want, or do they just want good search results? As an example, McDonald's don't ask people what they want and then build their menu based on what people say they want. Because I think if they did surveys based on what would you like to see more of, I think you'd see a lot more salad on the menu. But in reality, McDonald's build their menus based on what people do rather than what they want. There's your salad. So I said I'd get back to Benny, and just for a second, the danger here is listening to what people say. Just because people aren't complaining about your product, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing a good job. And there may be things out, just because people aren't asking for a particular thing doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want it. People often don't know what they want, and that's where this idea of quick experimenting, diagnosing problems by observing, or at least trying to understand your users' motivations comes in. One last thing that I've ripped off from someone else, and I'll get back to the story. I love this. The product death cycle. No one uses our product. Ask customers what features are missing. Build those missing features. No one uses our product. I'd say, for us at the University of Edinburgh, it's possibly the same for you, that maybe it's not no one uses our product, it's more everybody complains about our product because they don't have any choice but to use it because it's a university-supplied service. Again, the danger of asking people. Anyway, back to my story. So, we were talking about advanced search, and we were trying to work out how to build that into the interface. So what we did was a little experiment. We revealed an advanced search tab in our search results. But when people clicked it, they got this. We didn't reveal it for very long, because I think if it was found out that we were doing this, it might not have gone down so well with some people. But we revealed it for a very, very short period of time. I think it was 3 8-hour windows in the course of 1 week. Okay? And then we took it away again. One of those things, it's easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. Guess what? So I said we revealed it 3 times. It was seen about 35,000 times. Guess how many times it was clicked? Anybody want to hazard a percentage?
0.2%.
0.2. So about 1/3%. It was about 90 times it got clicked. And there was a little survey there as well. Admittedly, people weren't expecting that, and they probably didn't want to participate in a survey when they're in the middle of a search task. I recognise that. But the reality is nobody expressed a preference for what they wanted to see. Nobody took part in the survey. I appreciate that. But I think that says, when you think back to that survey, the number 3 thing, it got hundreds of votes. It got 12% of the votes. But in reality, when we presented it, nobody used it, or tried to use it, should I say. So we reduced the development time because we just decided not to do it. We killed it as an idea. We learned something that our long it's out there in research, as I've said already, but something that maybe I needed to convince some colleagues that, if the survey says that, we should do that. But it gave us the time to focus our efforts on other areas. So we spent our time that we had much more smartly. So that's my little story. And I'd just like to leave you with a few reminders, a few recommendations. So the first thing, as I say, if you take nothing else away from this, learn that lean UX hypothesis statement and just have a go next time somebody comes to you asking for that link on the home page, that new widget, that totally new software, that new service. Try and fit it into that lean hypothesis statement. To just challenge, is this what you mean? If I do this thing for you, this is what you're expecting is going to happen. Get creative about how you test your hypotheses. The Thomas Sharon book that I mentioned there, Validating Product Ideas, is excellent for that. It's tons of ideas, and it's all based around UX methodologies. So we got very lean. We presented a link. It took like an hour's effort to present something in the interface and then take it away again. And we learned enough that saved us a week or 2 of work. Help your managers by framing their requests. And the key thing to remember with all of this stuff, you might get some enthusiasm with your team, but it's not a validation effort if you're not willing to kill the idea. You have to accept that if it's wrong, we're going to abandon it and move on. Leave the egos out. So I've provided a link there which goes back to a narrative of basically what I've talked through here that I presented internally a few months ago. I'm going to stick my slides up on SlideShare before the end of the day, but if you're interested in what I've been waffling through there, and probably missed a couple of good points as well, it's all there in a blog post already. So, I'll end there. As with Benny, thank you. Anybody got any thoughts? Or? Hi, there's a microphone on its way up. Right up to the back of the room to start. Hi.
If you can introduce yourself, your name and who you work for.
Sure, I'm Marianne Kay from Digital Clarity Group. My question is, I wondered how that project for CMS user experience improvement came about. We've heard a lot of people complaining how they don't like their CMS and it's not usable, but but it's very rare that those complaints lead to an improvement project. So where did the initiative come from?
Coincidence, I think. Probably. I'd like to say there was a great strategy within the University of Edinburgh, but yeah. I have been working at Edinburgh on the CMS service for about 10 years now. And I have a background in training, and I was the user support manager, so I was one of the two core managers. Someone took the techie side, and I take the user side of things. So I've been doing that for 10 years across two content management systems. I've always had an interest in usability and user experience, and my role's evolved. So I've always put usability at the heart of everything that I do for the user community. So we had a content management system that was very powerful, but everybody hated it, and it was demonstrably very inefficient, and it was having an impact on the business's engagement with the service that we were providing. So when the time came to change the content management system, and we switched to an open source solution that maybe gave us a little bit more flexibility in terms of what we could do, I was there poised and ready to pounce, really. So I'm lucky I work with a great team who've got an open mind for these kinds of things, so we could build it in. And the masterclass that I'm running tomorrow, which is all about agile usability testing, is basically a run through what we did every development iteration. We watched people use our CMS all together, we identified things, and we prioritized new problems. So we were constantly looking, but it's just kind of, it's in the blood, I suppose, now. So look.
Thank you.
More questions? Kevin, Dominic, there's another
Well, Kevin Muse, University of South Wales.
Hiya.
I was wondering if part of the problem is, or what do you think the problem is?
I can repeat the question. It's just shout, Kevin, and I'll repeat it.
Yeah. I wonder if part of the problem.
No, it needs to be on the video stream.
Hello? Better. I wondered if the people who are asking for the features, do they know the cost of providing those features?
Kind of. It just depends. I mean, the last 8 months or so, we've been experimenting with other funding models. So various parts of the institution have been coming forward with additional funding rather than central funding to specifically deliver particular features. So that the person with the money there quickly finds out. But because we work in an agile way, you kind of break down the features into a series of sub-features. And so the principles that I've been talking about apply equally in that context too. So as you do in agile, you go from the must-haves through to the we could and should. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I suppose ultimately the person, paying has to know. It's just a question of, from my perspective, is the thing that they're asking for truly going to deliver the thing that they think they're going to get from it? And so it's, from my role, is challenging that requirement. So who do you believe is going to use this? What will they use it for, and what will they get out of it? Because sometimes teasing that information out, you diagnose that actually it's not feature X that they want, or need. They want feature X, but what they actually need is feature Y, or the things that they prioritize aren't necessarily the right ones. So.
Hi, Martin Dunlop from University of Strathclyde. When you said earlier on about if, for example, the Vice Principal comes along and wants a feature, I'm sure that'd be something a lot of universities might not have the clout to say no to. How would you tackle that problem?
I'm talking big here because there's no vice principals in the room. No, I'm not suggesting that we say no because it's pretty much impossible. But still persevere with the hypothesis statement, because you end up doing the thing that they want, but what you've done is agreed what they believe it's for and what it'll deliver. So if you build in a way to objectively measure that everyone agrees with, I suppose the long-term view is that people start coming to you with problems rather than with features. So yeah, I don't pretend for a second that we get away with turning things down. I can think of 3 websites or software projects that I've been engaged with this year that I don't have the greatest confidence in terms of what the implied outcome is meant to be, but hey, we're doing it.
Cool.
Hi, Dan Wiggle from the University of York. I like the thing you did with the advanced search button. I think that's a neat trick. And I wonder, after disproving the hypothesis that the advanced search button was what was required, having been the 3rd item on that list from the top task survey, did you do further work to dig into what it was that users actually needed that led to them saying that that was the 3rd most wanted feature, having proved that they didn't actually just want a button? And how did you dig into that?
With the time and the resource that we had available, and we had a list of things. So you saw that survey with the most popular things. The thing that I didn't put up in the slide here is we almost always kind of turn it into a matrix. So down one axis you have how popular something is, what the demand is, or what the usability benefit is, or whatever, and across the other axis how hard it is to do. So we kind of have a 4-quadrant matrix. So we try to focus on the things that bring most benefit for least effort. So really, in that instance, we just moved on because there were 3 or 4 other things that were doable in the time that we had available. So no, to be honest, that one just got parked. But I was pretty confident with that one because I had a very strong inkling that was going to be the case anyway, because it is so well established that what people say and what people do are not the same, and typically people think what they want is more sophistication and more power, when in reality their behaviour shows that what they want is greater simplicity and speed.
Time for one more question.
Hi, Sam Trafford, University of Liverpool. I was just wondering, in terms of relating to the advanced search button again, you said you released it over an 8-hour period on a few occasions. Did you vary the way it was presented at all?
In that instance, no, but what we did before that was we paper prototyped a few different designs. So it was some very rapid, iterative usability testing on small samples, and went with the one that seemed to be working best in that instance. I think there were maybe 3 or 4 ideas, if you like, of designs that were tried before we got to that. I think I know where you're coming from, that there could have been a usability issue, that they weren't noticing the call to action, so they weren't interacting with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'd just like to finish off our first session of the first talk by asking people to give their thanks to Neil in a traditional way.
Thanks very much.
And just to observe, Chris will like this. On all of Neil's slide, he had his Twitter handle, the event hashtag, and the session hashtag. So those of you who are speaking tomorrow or the next day, there's a model for you to follow. So if thanks. So if I can ask Gareth to go up to the front, and thanks for the people who are giving their thoughts and reflections and observations, not just on the talk, but also on the things that might be not going quite right about the sound levels. So perhaps we do need to think about lapel mics for tomorrow's session. So if we can look into that. But now our first speaker. So you'll need to be conscious of the need, your fellow speakers, to talk from behind there and try and protect your voice. So over to Gareth Edwards, who's first-time speaker and first-time attendee.
No,
sorry, you were here last year as well.
Second time attender and first-time speaker. Am I coming through all right at the back?
A bit louder.
Yeah. How's that? Is that a bit better? So, just to introduce myself, my name's Gareth Edwards. I'm Digital Services Manager at University of Greenwich. My colleagues will be speaking in a while. We've got Nick Ashton, who's my lead designer, and we've got Jamie Cameron, who is lead developer. Now, what we wanted to speak to you today about was, at the back end of last year, we were involved in a large but rapid project at Greenwich to really do a complete kind of uplift of our online experience. And so we thought we'd give you a bit of a run through of how that went today and what was involved. So to give you a bit of a background to begin with, Greenwich in 2015 was a university undergoing an awful lot of change. That was change on an institutional level, but also within the web team as well. In fact, up until the beginning of 2015, there hadn't really been a web team at all. There were people within the institution doing various bits of web in different faculties and directorates, but no one really consolidated together, although Nick was here already and was leading on things from a marketing department perspective. So 2015 was about establishing that web team, and we also had a Vice-Chancellor who is very technology focused and was very keen that we start to move forward online and do things better there. And he was very much driving the idea that we needed to invest in that and improve in that. And I'm not just saying that because he's the chair of JISC and is probably actually watching this as we're speaking. So the difficulty was that at the same time there was a perception that web people could be a barrier to change rather than people who could drive it. And that was not necessarily because they didn't trust in the internal abilities of people who were there, but it was just that natural build-up you get in an institution where people start to be seen as a support function more than the function that actually drives things forward. Now, in the summer of 2015, our Vice-Chancellor helpfully announced to the university that by the end of autumn this year we will have a new website. That was news to us as a newly formed web team, and that left us with roughly about, at that point, 5 months into which to deliver an entire new website. To give you a background on that website, we've got about 14,000 web pages. We've got a mixture of external and internal content, and all of that content is actually managed by 300 devolved users spread across 11 faculties and directorates. We've also got an unknown number of what came to be known as rogue sites. So these were sites that had cropped up because people, they felt frustrated that they couldn't get their things through, so it popped up elsewhere. And the last major redesign had been carried out in 2010, but as is often the way with these things, once the first visual elements of that design had been delivered, there'd not been the support for the web people dispersed through the organisation to really push that through and drive it to completion. So as a result, we actually had at least 3 different designs of web pages across our website and our web estate where previous redesigns hadn't been completed. So to give you a couple of examples, these were 2 of our earlier ones that were still popping up all over the place. And this is the actual front page of the university website as it was in the 2010 design. Now, it was a perfectly good design for 2010, and again, I'm not just saying that because Nick did it. I'm also saying it because it was, it was good. It dealt with what it was at the time, but obviously the world had moved on hugely since then. Mobile was huge and everything else. So, to give you an idea of the web team that was tasked with this 6-month rebuild, that would be 5 people. That was myself as Digital Services Manager. That was lead designer and lead developer. And the good news was we did at least have 2 contract staff. We had a PHP developer who also was capable of working within our CMS, and a Squiz Matrix developer, and Squiz Matrix being our CMS. Then the contractors left. So we were down to 3. So to kind of recap on the challenges we faced, we had a small team, had a large website, little time, lots of stakeholders, and still that kind of lack of confidence in the ability of an internal team to deliver change. Now, what we wanted to do despite this was we knew that what we didn't want to do was repeat the mistakes that we'd made in the past. What we didn't want was just a 4th design to add to our 3 designs that were already available across our entire digital estate. So anyone in this room who has managed a website for more than 2 years knows that there's one dreaded word, which is the reskin. The reskin is the thing you do when you don't have time to do anything else. And that tends to feature in kind of the standard university website lifecycle. You build your fresh website, it's quite nice, it has a few holes, but it's generally pretty good. Over the years of everyday use, it tends to creep in, gaps appear and everything else. And then you quickly reskin it, and it doesn't really come out quite how you expected it to come out. Now, we wanted to break that cycle. And our approach to breaking that cycle was to really turn around and look at what was happening elsewhere within the industry, but also things that came up at events like this, and say, no, look, we do need to break this cycle. And the good thing was, because we had at that very senior level a Vice-Chancellor that understood technology, we could turn around and pitch and say, no, look, you don't want this. You don't want us just to do another 4th version of this. Let's do something else. So we put down and said to break this cycle that what we needed to do is we needed to put our users first. We needed to really build in that ethos from scratch of saying they are the people that should drive the decisions that are made in this. We also then wanted to create a platform for future development. This couldn't be a reskin. It had to be a platform on which we could do future changes and future improvements. And we also had to deliver demonstrable change. And that was because if we didn't demonstrate change to the organisation, if we didn't deliver on time more than anything else, then we were never going to be given the trust and the opportunity to drive change again. They would always see web as a support function, not as a function that pushes things forward. So that's the end of my bit. And so with the interstitial quote, which is an actual quote that Jamie said at the time we were trying to do this, I'll hand over to Jamie now, who's our lead developer, to talk a bit more about how we engaged and how we pushed through our preparation for this.
Okay. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Okay, good. Can you understand me at the back? Right, well, this was early summer, and the VC said he wants a new website. And we said, that's all right, boss. Okay, boss, 6 months, sure, we can do that. Let's have a look at the brief. And we took a look at it and went, all right, okay, a bit light on the metrics. What are we actually trying to achieve? Where do we start? So obviously, you start with your users and your audience. Okay. Technology. So, I think we all agree that these are the questions that you would want to ask when you're trying to establish what your users want. But at that point, we're already starting to hit against the culture of the institution. Traditionally, and the web team is guilty of this to some extent, we tend to passively accept the feedback and the recommendations of the loudest group of stakeholders in the university. And this is going to be the group that's got the best or the most accepted or the easiest communication channel with the senior stakeholders and the web team itself. And this is going to be staff. So you end up with a website which is skewing towards an audience-inappropriate content. And it's either audience-inappropriate or it can be downright petty. I mean, I think we've all sort of had the forwarded emails, Dear Vice-Chancellor, I was trying to find a catering request form and I couldn't find it on the homepage. Therefore, I went into a meeting today with no biscuits. Sort it out. And you sort of like deal with these sort of emails on a regular basis. In the end, you start accommodating them, and that's a really bad way to go. So the other thing that's quite often happens is you end up being driven by consensus decision making. It's a classic thing in institutions that people say, we need a decision list. All right, we'll form a working group and we'll get a decision on that in a few months. And we just don't have the time. You know, it's a sense of urgency. So you've got staff who expect to be consulted, but no time to do it. You know, it's like academics. You know, we love you, but we've only got 6 months to change the website. So where we're going with that was we really needed to look at how we either break that cycle or break that culture or incorporate it. And that's when we looked at bringing in Precedent, an agency to work with. Okay, so these are all the things that Precedent could bring us. If I could sum it up, they could bring us sort of concept, communication, and validation. I think it was the best of all in the world. I mean, we all know that web teams are renowned for their communication and social skills, but primarily we are a technical design and implementation group, and these are a set of skills, these up here, which we just simply did not have, or did not have the time to develop in order to hit the deadlines for late autumn. So, I mean, Precedent as an agency could offer us not only expertise and knowledge of the sector, but the industry. And quite often when you're in the sector, the education sector, you end up seeing your industry from the prism of the sector. And so it's important to sort of break out of that and see it as a holistic thing. They also, they were resourced to carry out workshops and to create concepts and things. And these are the elements that they help with. So we ended up using them to using, that's not the right term, but they're really helpful for actually getting some of the skills that the team needed, which didn't have, into the project. Pretty early on, they were developing the workshops and the stakeholder engagement tools that we needed to get feedback from our core stakeholder groups and widening it out to not just staff but to students and prospective students as well. They developed the user personas, which are very helpful for, critical for keeping us on the sort of straight and narrow, for making sure that we were developing our site along user journeys and audiences, and not just sort of drifting off of our project goals. And lastly, I just want to say something about external validation, because it's very easy when you bring in an agency to feel that you know, they've paid a lot of money to tell you what you knew already, and you get a bit defensive about it. But that's kind of the point. And that when they come to us and say, well, these are our findings, and they were similar to what we'd ourselves thought, you know, that's actually a good thing. We say, that's great. Now, can you take exactly what you said to us and repeat it to these guys over there? Maybe they'll believe you. And that's exactly what happened, and it was incredibly helpful. This is an example of one of our personas, and what this is a case study, basically taken from feedback from one of the stakeholder groups. The groups to find out what the different users wanted from the website, and you put it together and you create a fictional character. In this case, a prospective student for the university. Finally, we didn't ask prospectives to give us a 3-month redesign, because it wouldn't be utilising everything that they could deliver us. I asked them how we could take the website forward in an ongoing stages. And so we said to them, like, we'll worry about the deadline and how we'll implement it, and that's what we're going to talk about in a bit. And what's important is what we got from them was a sort of a stage model for how we take it forward. I'm going to pass over to Nick to talk about triage now. Nick.
Hello. So, we are on a 6-month project to deliver something that precedent said was quite an aggressive timeline when they thought they were getting 6 months and then we were getting 6 months. We're a team of 5 that's become a team of 3, and we're 3 months in to that 6 months. Were we worried? Well, no, not really, because we'd sort of done that deliberately. We knew we needed that build-up. Did we start building? Well, we didn't, because we knew that we needed to know what we were going to build from what we'd been presented, which was a long goal. We needed to know what we were going to do for our short goal, for that deadline, which we'd agreed with the Vice-Chancellor that December was in autumn. And we had, at the same time, we had our BAU tasks. Obviously, we had no time to do that, to do the kind of testing we'd want to do, to put in the code we'd need to get that long goal. We'd need to be keeping those senior stakeholders up to date the whole time, and of course resist the creep, which we all know. And what we needed, I think, as Gareth alluded to, though, what we needed to do was to have success. And I don't know if any of you would recognise the idea that you can't achieve anything because the organisation you're in doesn't trust you to achieve anything, because you don't achieve anything, because the organisation you're in doesn't trust you to achieve anything. That's the cycle we really need to break. We needed to have that success, and that was really our key thing. Because really the goal of having a new website by autumn, December, was fairly artificial. What we wanted to do was turn that into a long-term win. So we needed to agree the core product in order to define what success was, which I think Neil kind of alluded to some of this stuff here. Who are those users? What do they need? What they're looking for? You know, we didn't have mobile at that time. I'd been trying to push that for 3 years without any luck, but we made sure that was part of the requirement, and it would be seen as success for us to deliver that. And also by looking at not just other organisations in the sector, in the UK, but US, Australian institutions, and of course external, non-education things, to point to things that we would be calling success for us, and getting those senior stakeholders to buy into that as what success meant. Obviously, there's some irony in us standing in front of you telling you not to do what other universities are doing, but there you go. And that meant looking at what our launch goal was, what our launch point was, and resisting that urge for features, because you're going to find things that you think would be great to go in. Your organisation is going to find plenty of people who can tell you what would be great to go in. There will be no shortage of ideas, and it's a matter of at each stage of those things, putting them through the tests, basically so you can bat them away, because your goal is more important than that. It is that success. It is that launch on time. And the things that make it in, it's not necessarily whether they're good or whether they meet this audience or that audience's need. It's how they get you to the point of launching something that's successful on time, so that in the future you are the part of the organisation that delivers good on time. Which means the last point on there, how complex is it to design and code, is as important as the other three. As the Basecamp team might say, the first rule of Triage Club is we don't talk about new features. So, having rejected a lot of things, at least temporarily, we put our triage categories together, starting with things that we wanted to be able to put things in, which was where we're inheriting, obviously, a website with a lot of classes in, a lot of images that we don't have time to replace. Parts of the site we knew were going to have to be done with minor changes, and we tried to put as much as we could into that category. Things that needed extensive HTML changes, obviously CSS changes were across the place, but that's the point of CSS. There were a fair few points where we needed the structure of the pages to be different a lot quicker than it was possible to do that with 3 people who were also deving and doing BAU, which meant we did put in, and we weren't frightened to put in hacks on JS, just to make sure, in a progressive way, that the pages had that structure across the board when we delivered. And there were also pages that we knew we were going to build from scratch. The homepage, obviously, things that we knew would be big impact, big win, low cost, and it was just easier to do it that way. And then we had a minimum viable product. Agreed with the VC, with again the senior stakeholder group, that we knew we could deliver, having looked at it, having looked at what we've got as designs, that we can do this in that time and maybe have time over for some of those additionals. And we said we'd do the top 2 levels of the site, because that seemed to be a key phrase that people like the sound of the top 2 levels of the site. We'll do that, yeah, no problem. Homepage, obviously, the last 2 weren't even in at the start, and we let them creep into our MVP when we knew that it was possible. But the key thing is that you need to know, with your launch product, at the beginning you need to know that you can hit it. When you get near it, you need to know how long it's going to take you to get from where you are to it being launched. And that gives you your route in. And Gareth's just going to talk about how we actually did the build.
Yes, so we've got about a month and a half left by this point, and we haven't actually done much coding at all. And as Nick says, that was deliberate, because we knew that we had to know what our minimum viable product was. We knew we had to be tight. We knew we had to define it and get it sorted down and done. And we only had 3 people. But again, luckily, the Basecamp team agree with us on this one, which is if you can't build your version 1 with 3 people, you either need different people, and in the university life cycle, that's not often an option anyway. And luckily, we were all brilliant at what we did, we think. Or you need to slim down your initial version. And that was why we were so tight on our MVP, and that's why we said we've got to keep this tight and we've got to keep this good. Now, it's very easy to throw 3 around, but actually there were good reasons for that. So within the build process of this, as we entered the build, what we ended up with is a basic principle that there are fixed roles that people need to hold and there are flexible roles that people need to hold. Now, the 3 fixed roles we had were design lead, which Nick was playing on this, development lead, which I was playing on it, more because my strength in background and development was originally JavaScript, and we knew that an awful lot of the heavy lifting on this was going to be carried out in script. and implementation lead, which Jamie fulfilled, because that really required a really heavy knowledge of our CMS and how it worked, and Jamie was the person who had the most knowledge on that. Now, those people were not the people who make the sole decisions on those areas, but when there is a tricky decision or a major decision, they would be the people who would make that decision. And by doing that, we were able to ensure there was a consistency of decision making through the whole process. There are also 3 floating roles, and this was just the pragmatic acknowledgement that with something like this and the time you've got and the people you've got, you can't be fully agile, you can't be entirely kind of scrum-based. You have to turn around and say, pragmatically, how do we deliver this? And that meant accepting that at various points, people were going to need to be in meetings. They were going to be writing those emails that tell people that you're freezing content. And that would be the role of the communicator, or whoever's holding that hat at a given time. There's also the support staffer. We had to do BAU throughout this. And actually the best way to do that was not to have everyone vaguely watching their inboxes and trying to do things constantly. It was to turn around and say to the rest of the university, and they were happy to do it, look, we're going to be able to do less of this, but you are going to get a win out of this. But what we will do is make sure that every Thursday or every Friday, we will get to all of your tasks and we will look at them and we will try and sort them. And at different points in the project, depending on who needed to do what, different people would play that role. And there was also the tester. Because at any given point, you're pushing through design changes, code changes, everything. And you don't want the person who's doing that testing that. Not only because it limits what else they can do, but they're not impartial. They can't spot the things that you've missed. Now, obviously, that was the roles, but how do we actually manage this on a day-to-day basis? Well, we use a technique which is using Kanban boards. Now, Kanban grew out of the Japanese car industry, and really what it focused on was getting production lines lean and slick and working. But really what it boils down to is that at the end of the day, all tasks, everyone's tasks go on a to-do list, and that to-do list you make as granular as you need it to be. And you prioritize that list every morning. And then what you do at the beginning, whenever you've got time to work on things, is you take one item from that list. You take the top item, the highest item you can do, and you move it onto the doing list. And everyone can only have one item on the doing list at any given time. And when you complete it, which hopefully you do, you move it off of that list and you move it to done and you select the next one you can do. But actually, where this benefits and where this is really useful for in an institutional environment is it has an innate acceptance of the fact that at various points during that process, you're going to get hijacked. You're going to get pulled off because, some academic somewhere has now found that their staff profile is completely broken and they're giving a talk and it has to be fixed. So what this acknowledges is that what you can do is you can take things off of the doing list and put them back on the to-do. And then someone else can pick them up, or you can pick it up later, but you get a very clear picture at all times about what's going on. Now, this is just an example of one of our Kanban boards. This was actually in Trello, which is a free tool. You can use it. It's brilliant. And really, you can see the principle of the lists there. Now, one of the reasons we liked Trello is because you can actually tag individual people to who's working on things. And one of the things you'll notice on this slide, actually, is that you'll see one of those rare instances where actually someone's tagged to an item on the to-do list, even though it's not been moved off yet. And actually, we found early on in our process that was actually a critical thing to add in, because that was a task where we had identified that only one person on the team could do that task. And therefore, there were times when that task might only be the 4th item on the list. But if Nick's looking at it and Nick knows he's got the time to do it, he's better picking that item because Jamie and I can work through the top 3. Now, that was how we approached the day-to-day management of that. But what did we actually do on a site level? Well, the key thing for us was actually taking the approach, and this is as much about future-proofing as anything else, of separating our concerns. And this was a basic software principle of saying you need to work out what your different layers of almost activity and substance are and treat them in separate ways. Now, the advantage of that, and haven't seen our Squiz representative in the room, so I think we're all right. The advantage of that is it means that when you've got separation of concerns, if you need to drop one of those layers at some point and bring a different one in, it's a far easier exercise. So you reduce your kind of vendor lock-in, which is a huge, huge thing to do in this sector. So what we ended up with was 3 layers. We had our content layer, and this was really about serving up that content. This was delivered via the CMS, and it was our semantic HTML. It was structured in the right way, and it came from there. We had our design layer, which was obviously CSS, and we have our script layer, our JavaScript, which, as Nick says, we weren't afraid to use, as long as we used it in a progressive way. So the rules for our content layer were that our HTML should be as standardized as possible. And this was largely the domain of the implementer. They were there to kind of make sure that our CMS was delivering it up in the way we wanted it. Critical to that was really an exercise of going back and removing so much styles in JavaScript that just crept into our CMS, or paint layouts that were there delivering things, because they do creep in. But by being there, they prevent you from really being effective elsewhere. And that turned out being a huge task, was effectively stripping our HTML back. It also almost had some casualties, which was at one point, I remember Nick and I decided that from a JavaScript and a CSS perspective, what we really needed was a class on like 90% of our H2 headers in the CMS. And we made Jamie go back and put it on all of these things. And then about 3 days later, after he finished it, we worked out that we could actually work without it. And I think at that point was the closest we came to being murdered. What was crucial, though, was what we needed to make sure our other layers would work would be that our content layer, our HTML, would always effectively tell the other layers where they were at any given point. So for that, we used a principle called namespacing. And that was very simply the fact that what we would do on a page-by-page basis, on a section-by-section basis, is we would dynamically allocate a class to each of our pages to say, so that the site itself knew where it was at any given time. What that meant was that when the design layer kicked in, we could not only make it human readable and lean, but we could also take advantage of the fact that they're called cascading style sheets for a reason. You can cascade with them. And what that means is you can write general styles that apply to everything, and we did in that place. For the majority of the 14,000 pages we had on that website, we wanted a white background on our first level divs on those pages. Brilliant, that's a general rule. It's going in the general rules. Actually, for our articles, we didn't. So on our article namespaces, by extending our CSS classes, we were able to turn around and make it so that we only delivered those things out in that way. Now, I won't go into depth on this. If anyone wants to talk about the tech side of this at another point, grab us at any point and bring beer, and we'll talk for far longer than you actually want us to talk about it. So finally, the rules for a scripting layer was that scripts should not be required, but they should progressively enhance the user experience. So what this meant was no user coming to our website should be inconvenienced by the fact that they're not running JavaScript, even though it's a very small percentage of users who do that now. But what it did mean is we could turn around and improve the experience for those who did have it in. Maybe that was something as simple as changing up the layout or adding extra functionality on menus, but it would be there. Also, more critically, what that allowed us to do was take the approach of saying, as Nick alluded to earlier, that where there was a choice between writing some CSS that would just use the old classes that had lurked in our site for ages, or to write new CSS that would work for our future site in the path we wanted to, and then use JavaScript to make the old pages behave in the same way, we would do the latter. And by doing that, that meant that what we weren't doing is creating this enormous bulk of code that was only relevant to our older pages. We were not a big enough team to be able to do that if we wanted this to be a forward-thinking project rather than something that was just about doing old things. And finally, we actually worked out how we could deliver specific scripts based on namespace as well. And by doing that, what we really reduced was it meant we could only call in the right JavaScript to the right sections, and again reduce our testing overhead, because there was a far lower in potential for things like code clash or race conditions or anything like that. So that was really how we built it. Now really what we'll just kind of move on to now as a final section really is to talk about what really matters. And as I think we've all said all the way through this, our key goal with all of this was we knew we had to deliver. And I know it's a semi-apocryphal quote, but it's a good one, and it's not a proper tech presentation unless you end with a Steve Jobs quote in it somewhere, which is that real artists ship. And that's what we did. And the lessons we learned from that was launch at 95%. The biggest flaw that we potentially have as institutional bodies is we are always questing for that perfect thing to launch. Whereas if you've defined your minimum viable product, if you know what is the base level of success you need to do, if you know the base level at which your users will get a better experience, then there becomes a point where it doesn't even matter if there's still a few features you're tidying up. Your users will get a better experience, so put it live. And that's really what we did. And again, it's an acknowledgement of the fact that the web is an inherently changeable medium. We're not writing books. Whatever you launch, it probably in about 3 months' time is not going to be what it turns out your users wanted anyway, as Neil alluded so very well earlier. So don't be afraid to launch. And again, as Nick said earlier, know what your countdown to launch is. We knew when we'd hit our MVP, and probably shouldn't say this in case anyone from Greenwich is actually watching it, but we hit our MVP actually about 2 weeks out. We already knew we were launchable with 2 weeks to go. But what we also knew was that gave us the ability to turn around and look at what we hadn't built in and what we could improve and what was high on those features lists that had almost made the cut but hadn't made the cut. And we also knew that we needed basically about 4 days to push the damn thing live. And we'd done pre-tests and we'd run test deployments to prove that that was the case. And then finally on 1st of December 2016, so yeah, that very last day of autumn, famous last day of autumn, we pushed live GRE V1. And feedback was excellent. Surprise within the institution and without that actually we delivered on time. Going back to our Squiz rep was wonderful, I won't name her, but I remember her ringing me up on January 5th, I think it was, and asking how our redesign was going. And I said, you mean the one we were meant to be launching on December 1st? And she said, yes, now how's it going? I said, we launched it on December 1st. And she said, really? We're not used to that. I said, yeah, well, maybe you should give us some more features now and pay us a bit more attention. But it's that kind of approach that we knew we needed to hit, not just for our internal stakeholders, but for our external ones as well. So we over-delivered in the end because we did it right. And what did we over-deliver? Well, we improved subject pages as well. As Nick alluded to earlier, we improved our course search and search autocompletes. And that was actually based off of some of the feedback and metrics we did have, which highlighted that actually, on average, only about 25% of our site visits started on the homepage. But actually, of those 25% of the site visits, they all went to the search and they all wanted to find courses. So actually, by turning around and really improving our autocomplete level, we reduced it so that they really were finding those courses quicker. And actually, they were finding them within the typing of 3 characters rather than having to type a full search. And from feedback and from our user journeys and our user profiles, we knew that that was a critical design requirement, certainly from a millennial perspective. And finally, with all of these projects, never underestimate the power of a lucky win. Now for us, a lucky win was the fact that when we actually sat down and looked at it and went, right, we've agreed to push this design to the first 2 layers of this website, actually it's far easier to push it to all of them. It will be more work for us to push it to the first 2. So actually we pushed it to all of them and then quite rightly pointed out that we'd over-delivered and that was a win. What did we de-scope? Again, the critical thing for this was that launch at 95%, but all the way through was turning around and constantly asking ourselves, is this something that is going to delay us? And if it's going to delay us, is it critical to the users? Because if it's critical to our launch users, then either we need to find something else to drop or we need to drop it. And actually the things that tended to drop out were actually things we found we didn't need. Image galleries and management was one of the big things we dropped. Actually we found that most of the sections that really mattered to our users didn't use galleries heavily. They tended to pop up in places where people were trying to almost promote themselves rather than promote the courses. So actually we de-scoped them and we pushed them back. Dynamic homepage. For the first 2 weeks of our new site being live, the homepage was entirely constructed out of flat HTML. Now that was partly because we were still tweaking the design and wanted to see how people used it, but it was also because we worked out that actually we wanted to make it more complex and easy to manage, but our PR department weren't capable of doing that straight off the bat if we were doing it through HTML. So we managed it for those first 2 weeks because they weren't releasing stories fast enough for us to worry about it. It could be a BAU task we took on, and then we built a better management module later on. And finally, faculty-specific versions of the homepage. Originally, we'd planned to do similarly kind of over-designed versions for the faculty homepages, but again, actually, they weren't that high traffic, and we worked out we could drop it relatively easily to a later date. And new layouts for news articles. News articles are one of those things that every site has, but actually we found that our core users were not reading them. They were there again to promote the PR, and they met that purpose perfectly fine for the most users. So the only thing we actually did do was we came up with a nice future-proofed long-form article layout. Because actually what we didn't want to do was say, well, we can't do anything with these. We wanted to say is, look, if you work with us, this is the kind of stuff we can do going forward. And we were able to launch with that and launch with that on the homepage and linked off of the homepage, and people really liked that. So finally, what happened next? Well, we implemented the things we de-scoped. We pretty much covered all of that list now, and it's all in there. We've also found that now that we've got that kind of growing acceptance that we delivered, an awful lot of the kind of rogue sites that exist are starting to voluntarily re-enter the fold. They're starting to turn around to us and say, look, how can we use your design principles? How can we use your designs? How maybe can we actually re-enter and be back on the main website again? So an awful lot of that is actually due to the confidence that within the team and the university now to actually that we can deliver. And again, for us, that was a critical role. And one of the big reasons for it to go back right to the beginning was because we knew if we could prove that we could deliver, then we would get that next 9 months to carry on doing this as a project. That they would say, okay, you delivered a win for us. We got a really nice experience. Our users are much happier. What else can we do now? And as an institution, we're far more confident about doing that now as much as a web team. And what that's leading to is an awful lot more new focus and work, actually, on our user journeys, on how we move people through the site, on our navigation, which is anyone in this room who has sat down and tried to take an institution through the eternal question of who gets on the menu is always the most fun thing you can ever do in a web team. And also a new focus on dynamic and programmatic content. And we're doing some really interesting stuff in that area, and hopefully, maybe we can talk to you about that next year. But that's us, that was our project, and that's what we delivered.
We have about 3 minutes for questions. Questions?
Pretty comprehensive.
Name.
Sam Trafford, University of Liverpool. I don't know if it's something that I missed, but you had the consultation with the agency that did the sort of research behind it. Did you go to a design agency as well?
Precedent, effectively, one of the beauties of working with them was that they were able to deliver some high concepts of what they wanted to do. And what we were able to then use them to test that against kind of key user groups and everything else. So what we did a lot of was test those high concepts. But again, what we said to them was, look, we don't need you to worry about how this works in HTML. You know, we don't expect them to be entirely complete. What we do expect is you're giving us a kind of an overarching idiom, a kind of an idea of how this should feel more than how it should actually behave. So what they weren't doing was saying every single element on this page is going to be built like this. What they were doing was saying, here is a broad range of primary palettes. You want to use this metro style because that's what's really testing well when we start pushing it at your key audiences, your kind of prospective students. So they gave us that high level, but then we actually worked out how to implement that, and Nick led heavily on how we actually deliver that on an actual basis.
Hi, Mandy Phillips from Liverpool John Moores University. First of all, congratulations. I felt your pain having gone through it last year, and the stories were remarkably similar. What I'm interested in, since you've gone live, is how you're using analytics to give you some more insight into what you do next.
It's something that we're just starting working on hugely. We've used it already to kind of tweak some of the elements of what we did and what we delivered, because now we're trying to be in a much more kind of iterative state. We turn around and we look to kind of aggressively change things regularly. We've made further tweaks to how we do autocompletes. We've switched to a different autocomplete library because it wasn't completing fast enough, and that was clear from the metrics. But actually, one of the big things that we are looking to do and are hoping to push forward to next is we pushed things like universal analytics to the site finally for our Google Analytics a little while back. And really, actually, what we've still been doing is we wanted to almost give things, the really detailed things, about 6 months to bed in and see how things happened. And not least because actually university website traffic is cyclical and it changes based on the portion of that cycle. So if we turn around and said, actually, we need to make changes to our site based on this is how people are using it in December, we'd actually be probably not doing anyone who is trying to use it in clearing justice. So there's lots of work there to be done. The good news is actually is when we say, and it goes back to what Nick was saying earlier, is like when we turn around to people and they say, I want to do X because I think people do that, is we can turn around and say, that's nice, where in the metrics does it say that?
Okay. Thank you, Gareth and colleagues. I think that was a great example of a pragmatic talk, sharing real, experiences with a wider community. So can we thank speakers in the traditional way? And just some final notes before we break for coffee. If you're a workshop facilitators, you're allowed to go to the front of the queue if you need a coffee fix. I know some of you have travelled a long way, but you'll need to go to the various workshop rooms in order to set things up. The rooms for the workshop, coffee is up on level 5, where you got your folders from. On the sheet On the back there is the room number for the various workshop facilities. Session A5 unfortunately has been cancelled. If you didn't redeploy, you can go to any of the other sessions. The venues are also on the Hoover app. Thanks for the various real-time feedback from the back there, the people who couldn't hear at the back. We will be having voice clips, microphones tomorrow, so thanks for that comment. Tonight's conference dinner is at the Merseyside Maritime Museum, which is an absolutely brilliant location. The doors will be open to delegates from 7 o'clock, and food will be served from 7:30. Bring your conference badges. I've also got a viewing of the Titanic Gallery. They're opening up one of the galleries for the delegates between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock tonight. You are allowed to take your drinks down to that gallery, but not into the Titanic special exhibition itself. The venue will be available till 11:30, and there will be a cash bar available after the conference drinks have been supplied. But remember, we'll be starting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So, thank you. And for those of you who are watching the live video stream, we hope it's been useful. If you've got any feedback, please provide it, and we'll be starting again at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.